I think we're live here for the next episode of the Cathode Ray Podcast. My name is Louis Zezerin, and I am here with my friend Steve Nutter. How you doing, mate? How you doing, Steve?
Hey, Louis. I'm doing great. How are you?
As well. It's cold and dark in Estonia right now, -6 Celsius today. I haven't seen the sunlight in days. It feels like years. So I've been inside all day. But besides a little bit of that dark weather, things are all right. Things are okay.
No, that sounds just awful for the temperature, to be honest. Here it's in the United States we use Fahrenheit. It's about 45 degrees, so it's not too bad. It's still sunny. It's definitely creeping upon winter, and I did notice a little bit of fresh snow on the ground this morning. Not much, just a little bit like flurries of ice or something on the car. So it's getting colder here too. Thankfully not below freezing though.
Okay. Yeah, we've got the snow, and I actually prefer the snow when it's around. Like, it adds some light and reflects a little bit, and it's not so, it breaks up the day a little bit. So I don't think I might have to go out later, and I'm just sort of not looking forward to going out to that very cold car and starting that in -5.
Yeah, do you have it stored in a garage, or do you just have it out in the elements?
It's in the elements, but the preheater of my car is just done for now. So it was having intermittent problems. It's like a thing you could turn on to a schedule, but -6 today, it gave the fuck up and just doesn't want to turn on. So
that's a wrong time to have problems with that.
I'll be turning to my mechanic, and I was going to call him up tomorrow and be like, hey, when can you replace this thing? Because I can't make it through winter without my sweet, sweet preheater.
No, I hear you. I don't have anything. I have a garage, but it's filled with CRTs, so there's no way you could fit a car in there right now. And
that's true.
I was talking to my dad this weekend. I was like, how do I heat up this garage? Because there's no insulation in it. And my grandfather has this old wood-burning stove stashed in the corner that he salvaged from something 50 years ago. And he's like, oh, well, just hook that thing up. It could burn wood or coal. And I was like, what about the exhaust? I'll just put a pipe out one of the windows. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So yeah, if it gets desperate and I have to work out in the shop this winter, I'll be figured out a way to hook up that wood burning stove safely to the garage out there. But I hope I don't have to do that. That'll
help. I mean, otherwise, can you put some insulation on the walls? Is that going to work or something?
It would, it's like, yeah, but it's there's not enough. Or it would take a lot. That would be a big job. There's a lot of insulation would be needed.
And you have to be. You were saying you are careful when you're turning on your monitors after they've been in that cold. What's that process? What's your thinking around that?
Yeah, so you got to monitor your temperatures because it's a cold. Anything that's electronic that stays out in the cold, and then you heat it up, the electricity brings heat with it. And if you're using something, for example, that it has a lot of cold, they call them cold solder joints. So over time, those solder joints break down. I think it would just happen quicker if you have to give them time to kind of warm up. I don't like to start CRTs generally unless it's over 50 degrees within the room, and preferably over 60 degrees, and then below like 80 degrees if possible. But they are hardy, and they can withstand some temperatures below and above that, but you definitely don't want to use them too much around that freezing point, or when there's a lot of humidity is another factor. You don't want to use them if you have a very humid environment, just because that doesn't mix well, humidity and electricity.
Most of my my BVM collection, and again, I think the one that we got last week also came from the same collection, were in a outside broadcast van, so like a semi-trailer that could be dragged around to different events and then plugged in. And I know that thing sat outside for several years at least, and right now I don't think it freezes in my storage room. I think it's in a factory and then in a container, and I think it's not too bad. However, I also wouldn't turn them on when they're cold. However, in general, I don't mind that my monitors sit in the cold because, my figure is that, at least that's better for the capacitors. If heat is bad for capacitors, I thought that, storing them lower might help. No?
Well, they're not getting to the temperature where they're really damaging them. Usually just ambient temperature. But if you're the big thing is not you can store them in a much lower temperature than you can use them. Yeah, so that's not a big deal. But your environment can impact the breakdown over long term. I mean, just like here, for example, the U.S. military will go store equipment out in like dry, arid environments like the deserts to prevent them from breaking down if they were in a humid climate over here on the east where there's a lot of high humidity. And over time, that will just get into the components and break it down from like a rust perspective of just freezing and thawing. It's better to have the most dry, arid, environment for this kind of stuff, as well as you can store it at lower temperatures, and that's safe. I'm sure that yours isn't getting down to too far. Right at that freezing level is when you start worrying about it if it goes below freezing for too long.
Right,
or above like really, really hot, like, extremely hot, over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Then you worry.
I keep, as part of the cultural learnings of this show, I keep a browser tab open with the converter for temperatures. So the 100 Fahrenheit is 37 degrees, I just found out. Okay, I'm learning.
So around that area, you're okay.
Okay, we're up there. Well, Australia's not. I may go back to Australia at Christmas time if I'm allowed, but if we're allowed to now with the new variants that are coming out of the COVID and all this. But I would like to go back, and I may actually hit some of that 37, 40 degrees if I get home, and I cannot wait right about now.
Is it nice there now? Like it's summertime kind of there?
Yeah, it's about 20 degrees or so each day, and a nice day would be about 25. Very pleasant time of year right now, I'd say.
Awesome.
But that Christmas is going to be hot. We have hot Christmas.
That's crazy. Yeah, it's always cold for Christmas here for most part. I mean, you can go to Florida and some of the southern states and still get pretty warm near the equator, but it's still like even northern Florida will get down and be cold. Not good beach weather or anything.
Okay. All right. So we've got some. First of all, I want to thank everyone who's given us tremendous feedback on the episode so far. Great questions, and even just people commenting that they like the stuff. So I just want to say thank you very much for listening. And I know, Steve, you'll agree with me when I say we really appreciate people being interested in that, and I'm very happy about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Keep bringing your questions. We're enjoying looking through them and all the feedback. If there's anything that you like, or if there's anything that gets on your nerves about it, let us know. Or just we're here trying to make this as good and informative and entertaining as we can. And so we're happy when we can get more and more involvement from anybody for the show.
And if you have some thoughts on the editing, every episode I'm trying to edit it a little bit different, change the styles, and I'm messing with things sort of maybe more at a techie level. But if you have some thoughts about how you like it, please help. Please, do you like the split screen or the 1-to-1? And we're trying, week by week, trying to evolve this. So, all right, Steve, let's get into it. Now you had, besides Thanksgiving, what have you been working on this week?
Well, I went from like 2 weeks ago having probably 10 monitors going and working through, because sometimes you get some of those monitors and they don't have a lot to do in them and they're smaller. And then there's the opposite, which I've got right now, which is one gigantic kind of pain in the butt, which is this Sony PVM 2530. This one's from 1987, so it is plenty old, and it came in with intermittent power problems. I fixed that within a couple of hours, but since then, the person who owns it asked me if I would be willing to restore it further, and I've worked my way through just about every single board inside this PVM, which has about 3 normal PVMs worth of circuit boards inside of it, and so this one's been a struggle. Plus, then you get into the temperatures. Unfortunately, that one is a larger one, and I can't bring it down here. I could bring the boards from it off the monitor, but I can't bring the tube and everything to test it. So I have to wait till Tuesday or tomorrow will be the first nice day where I can get out there and actually test it for a couple hours safely. So that monitor, hopefully I'll be able to finish that up Wednesday-ish. I'm really hoping to be done with that one. I do have a video coming on that, at least one and maybe even two on it, because I did do the first small repair, and I did a video on that, and because it was cool, I got to like film it screwing up. So it was a lot of fun. I like to be able to film something, screw it up, and then go back and fix it and show it not screwing up anymore. That's always cool. So that one will do that, but then I would like to do a follow-up maybe to show more of the 2530. I'm surprised I've done so much work on that monitor and never actually shown a lot inside of it. So that's just the 2530 thing is a big one that I'm working on.
I think that on that 2530, I think it's an interesting topic around the work that you do. And like anyone who has to fix anything, you could easily be an auto mechanic, for example, the same thing. Maybe people relate to that example where it's tough because in your business, you're working on old things. Old things will have random problems, and I know you're very good at this, the way that you work and your business practices, because you need to be clear with people. Like, this is no guarantee that I can fix this. And you can see I have a great track history. I'll work hard. I'll communicate with you. And part of that communication is to be very real with them and honest with them. And it's also, I imagine, a very frustrating part of your work. You're just pounding your head against the wall. And what can you do sometimes?
Yeah, we're always going to be limited by the the starting condition of the monitor, and this one wasn't in great shape to begin with, being so old and never really serviced. And once you get one thing figured out, then you have testing, and another thing shows up, and then another thing shows up, and then another thing. And it literally goes on and on and on like that. And it is the automobile example is a perfect example where you own a classic car. These guys that you see them all the time on the TV shows where they'll buy a classic car and then they'll sell it when it's 3/4 of the way finished. And it's always like, yeah, I got it almost all the way done, and it needs that extra bit of work to really get it over the hump, but you could tell they've just invested so much personal time and money. It's really got to be something you love, because at the end of the day, yeah, you're putting all this effort and servicing into something that if you don't sit there and service every bit of it, or even if you do that, there's something that could just be out of its shelf life and be done, and then you'll be sitting there with a big paperweight, basically, that you've invested a lot of money in. But at the same time, there's always a chance that you get it, it works fine, and you get a few good years of enjoyment out of it. And that's really what everybody wants and hopes for. The 2530 I've been working on, it looks beautiful, but it just has like one minor issue I'm trying to figure out with the buttons, and then everything else seems to be working great on it and looks great. So you could tell the tube is good and strong, and the other good important parts are strong, which are the key elements to this CRT. The problem is there's so many different things going on in that monitor that it all has its own analog circuit board, so there's just parts and parts and so many interconnected tissues almost in this organism that that's this old school pro video monitor.
Yeah, it's just the nature of the work that you do, and I think the solution is, and I know we spoke about this earlier, being direct with your customers, being honest with them, talking it through with the situation, and then also preparing their expectations before it, communicating while you're doing it, and then also your knowledge to pick the jobs that you think can be done properly or that you have a reasonable chance of doing. And that's something that you get better with as you improve each time.
Yeah, well, I try to offer like some options also. So, for example, on the 2530, I went to the repair. I had originally quoted them a price to analyze it, do some work on it. And when I actually got into it and I repaired it, the repair costs were less than the original quote. However, any further additional work would have put it over the original quote. So at that time, I was like, look, you're welcome to come get this now. for the fee that's actually less than what we quoted the job actually to be, or you can go down the path of investing more into it if you really want to do that. And even at that, I have to, again, reiterate, like you say, I have to be kind of honest with people, because I see it happen a lot where I tell them, if there's always the chance that you invest this and it still doesn't last that long, something goes wrong in the monitor and it doesn't end up working, and it's still, even after you put all that extra into it, but at the same, so it's like a double-edged sword. Do you do it? And they decided to do it, which is fine, but yeah, there's always that option. And then I try to be realistic. I'm like, look, if you could go down this path and it not be a good path, as opposed to just taking it as it is and trying to use it as long as you can till something else goes wrong with it. But the problem with that is a lot of people don't have the option to, just come. These people live in upstate New York, so they drove quite a ways to come here and drop it off. So then you're thinking about, how do I get another trip down there if it has to get looked at again? But there's always that, and Lewis, that's heavily dependent on the age and condition of the monitor again when you start with. So, expect more the older the monitor is.
Sure.
Expect more trouble.
It is all part of the game that we're in. So, okay, so there's the big job, and we're hoping to get that done. So what else have you been doing this week?
Oh, yeah, so I did get to hang out with Save on Pat a little bit by phone. So actually, Save on Pat came to the rescue for me, and I have a D20 F1U, and that's that awesome, multi-format D-series 20-inch or 19-inch screen. So big size. It's a true curved still Trinitron tube, so it's not the flat screen like the D24 and D32. It's the still got that curve on it, and really anything that's in 4x3 looks awesome on it, from like 240p, 480i, and 480p, because anything over that, it will do it, but it won't. It'll go up to 1080i, but it won't. It will like shrink the screen to wide, 16:9.
Okay.
If you go to 720p or 1080i, but 480p, it still does full screen 4x3. So anything like that, we use it. And looks. That's like my favorite monitor for that. But it had so many issues when I got it. It only has 14,000 hours on it, and I had sent every single board to Pat to service. He serviced all the major boards for me, and I had to replace the PA board, which is a control board in it that controls the surge of contrast and like brightness going into the tube so it doesn't fry your tube. I had to get all those boards serviced, and that I was about $700 for all that. And thankfully, it's back. It's in the lab right now, testing for like 2.5 hours of just playing and monitoring and make sure it doesn't goof up again. I don't really know what else could go bad besides the tube at this point, or the flyback, because everything else on it has been serviced, checked out, or replaced. So that's quite exciting for me, because for the last 6 months, I've been waiting on the PA board specifically. He didn't have any, and I just reached out and I sent him an email, and he said, yeah, I have one. And he said he had 5 in a box, and 4 of them failed testing. And one of them was good. So I was like, yes. So I bought that, and it came in right after I got back from Thanksgiving from my family's cabin. And so I got to throw it in there, and it's been working good, and I'm really excited. Hope it stays that way. But that monitor is just a finicky beast that I'm afraid every moment. I mean, even I'm like, oh yeah, it's going to go out any second, just watching, waiting for something else to happen, because I've watched it just kind of get everything happen with it, just go worse and worse and worse.
I think the analogy there stands with classic cars, that if you're a mechanic who loves and works often on classic cars, your car always has some problems. Not because you're a bad mechanic, because you're always working on it, tinkering, trying a new one. I think, again, it goes with the territory.
That's a good point.
When you were talking about serve, so first of all, there's a bunch of interesting things there. So Pat has access to I mean, things come across his desk, how to say, not to say he's got the secret reserves in the bunker or something that he's hoarding from us, but over the years, I mean, because he is really the guy, I don't know, I say the OG, let's say the godfather of this stuff. He has a certain collection of spare parts, and we'll get to that a little bit later on, talking about parts and so forth. So there's that he has access to. But what would you said you sent the boards only to Pat? So what is he doing on that you feel isn't quite in your ballpark?
Well, here's the thing. When it comes specifically to like the D series monitors, there's tons of surface mount capacitors on that, tons of them. Not just through hole, but there's that. There's also the idea that Pat has so much experience in this specific one. I know it doesn't sound like very much, but I don't get a lot of BVM D series that come to me. I get mostly PVMs, and that mid-grade pro monitor end up in my area to me to service. So when it comes to something where I'll try to initially service it and check it out, and there's often times where I prefer to have him look at that. Like for my own thing, I was like, well, I'm not really, I'm thinking it's this. I've talked to him on the phone about it. He's like, oh yeah, you could send him in, and there'll become times when it's something I really do need as far as that, and I could have other things going on here where I don't have the time to look at it myself. But again, those boards have a lot of things in them that they're, again, surface mount capacitors that tend to go bad. There's also some updates that Pat would know from his years of experience in it. Plus, Pat has the monitor there for like BVMs, which have cards in them instead of whereas it's a PVM and it has everything within a shell, and you have to take it. It's more difficult to take apart. The BVMs have cards in them, so you just take out a card, and Pat may have a serviced replacement available, or he could check yours out. The good thing is he has the equipment there that is calibrated properly, so you can send it to him and get a good analysis of your parts if he's if it's something that he works on. And I know that he told me when I talked to him on the phone that he's been as busy as I have been right now, which is nuts because he's 90 years old. But he said he had 4 D-series D24s he was servicing the boards on, and then a 2950, which is the massive PVM. I know that he's really busy, and he still does cap kits, which are available on eBay for each monitor. So I talked to him because, he has – I don't know where else I would go to find a part that, you're like, hey, what is this? Does anybody have this specific part? Because I know he does have some there, and it's always great to get to talk to him because that I try not to talk to him too much, but it's surprising to me that he even remembers me when I call him once every 3 or 4 months just for a minute compared to however many people call him and talk to him about monitors. I know he does. People talk to me and him about it forever.
But I think you're too humble there. I mean, I think you're doing a fairly good work out there in CRTs.
Well, I don't want him to. I'm always
sure.
I always want to give him. I know with Pat, it's like he's got a lot going on, and I just want to don't want to overstep. So I know that next time when I need something, I can just ask him quickly. He gets back to me really quickly. So most of the time, I just email him back and forth asking about certain parts. And even if he doesn't have something, and then randomly I find, you'll find the parts online too, in eBay if you're lucky. But
I think it's good to have someone else to talk to. I mean, for a lot of us, I talk to you, you talk to Save on Pat. We all have someone to talk to. There's always someone, no matter who you are, no matter where you are, someone who's more of an expert. And even with the car analogy, I mean, I go to my mechanic, I trust him, he knows my car, he does everything. But when there's something really specific, I mean, rebuild part of the motor, he's like, no, you got to talk to that guy. He's the expert in rebuilding a diesel. I'm like, but you're the mechanic. He's like, no, you're an idiot. He's the guy who can rebuild a diesel. He does all of them. Just go take it to him. It's far better. It's very normal for these things to happen.
Yeah, there's a lot of there's so much good analogy there, or like any classic kind of item like that, where yeah, you're constantly in need of parts, but you're also in need of expertise. And what are you going to do when that expertise goes away, right? Or yeah, you've got to because it's the same way. You've got vital components, but then you've got different variations of monitors. And for people who are wondering, like, the D20 is one of probably the top. It's definitely in the top 10 CRTs like ever made for professional reasons, and so it's one of those that, yeah, it's like it's a centerpiece of anybody's collection. Their good ones are like $5,000 now, so it's a little bit more understandable to get them. Even like myself, I know that eventually I'll be able to go through and I could service them myself, but just to have kind of my own peace of mind on this model, to know that Pat's checked it out, I feel like that's money well invested in something like that, as opposed to it just sitting there and me eventually getting into it and figuring it out, down the road.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Which sort of leads us on to what I wanted to talk about today, which is I feel it's a discussion about what do we do with old CRTs. So maybe my situation is different to yours, and maybe my situation is more the same than the regular person who's watching this or who's into CRTs. Maybe they managed to get themselves a PVM or something, and that's their beautiful centerpiece. They're looking at consumer sets around their region, trying to pick up something while they can. More people have different amounts of storage space. I'm thankful enough to have a fair bit, so if nothing else, that kind of feeds my addiction because I know I have a place to go put them. But what that leads to is inevitably there's a 14-inch Sony, that sounds great, I'll go pick it up, and you get it, and there's something wrong with it. And you can do the work on it and you can look at it, but some monitors you just can't repair, or the average person just can't repair. And so I've got probably 4 or 5 of those monitors, and sitting around, I'm pretty sure that the work is beyond what I can do, and I suspect some of them just have bad tubes. Some of them are just done for. So then I start wondering to myself, what do I do? If I think that I can't fix that Trinitron or whatever it is, should I just chuck it? But then I feel bad chucking it out, but it's taking up space in my storage room and I know I can't fix it. And I live here on the edge of Europe. It's not like I can just drive over to Pat's place or something, or your place or something like that. And I was trying to get into the discussion about what we do with it. But I guess for you, let's start with you, because you have a different use case. You have a value to keeping some stuff around because you don't know, particularly at the pro level stuff, this could very well be useful for you. And exactly what you were just talking about with Pat. Pat's got no doubt a collection amassed over many years, which is why he's the expert. So first of all, what do you do with your second hand, your parts collection? Tell us about that.
Well, you summed it up really well. Kind of, there's 2 levels of parts, CRTs, monitors. They could be televisions or monitors. It's like, what is worth keeping, and what is worth keeping around, and then what's your other option? Because there's some stuff that you're going to get into that you could easily get, and it's like, this is really just not. There's not much use to it anymore. It could be beyond repair. There could be no need. Nobody wants it to be repaired, really. There's a lot of ones that will wear out, like you said, that might have something that's worthless. And unless you really want to like rip the whole monitor apart and just get the scrap metal out of it and then repurpose that for whatever reason, and you're really into that recycling and scrapping stuff, then you could do that. But otherwise, you're going to need to find out what is like your local area's rules, and what kind of infrastructure set up to help recycle or dispose of your CRT. Because there's rules generally wherever you live. I've lived in different areas where they will come out and somebody will pick up those kind of things from the usually from the local government, and then they take them off and they either pile them up somewhere or put them in a landfill.
I don't quite know what they do with them.
But there's something at least they're a municipality and they're responsible for taking it. They know what it is. because you can't just throw it away. Usually, in most areas, some areas still can just throw them away.
By
They're
that,
not
I mean, because
good,
that'll
but they're
go in a
not
dump
good.
truck, though.
Yeah, but they're not in a good. That's not good for the environment,
Yeah.
obviously. But if you have to that's why you got to be kind of selective on what you're going back and taking originally. Try to realize how much you can take.
Yeah.
Don't just take every junk or every huge CRT unless you do have space for it or a plan to get rid of it. You can always check with people too that are looking for possibly parts to your CRT, if through forums, especially like our forum here on Discord and other avenues online, as Facebook groups. My parts bin is reserved for mostly PVMs and BVMs. If the tube is bad, I'm not keeping it. I will do whatever necessary to get rid of it. There's actually a company, I haven't used them in a while, but they would send you a box for your glass tube, and you'd put the tube in there by itself. Of course, I know how to take everything else out of it, and that's not the stuff that's harmful anyway. That all can be safely recycled. It's just the tube, and they would send you a box for the tube. You put the tube in it, and you pay to ship it to them, and a small fee to dispose of it. And so you could do that to be safe with just the tube.
And that's specifically for CRTs. That's they know what they're getting.
Yeah,
they
yeah.
what
And
this
I got to be
is.
honest with you. Since the shutdowns of the last couple of years, I haven't even looked at it because I haven't had to get rid of any tubes. I kind of went through and got rid of all the bad ones. Everything I've got that's a tube now is a good tube. I don't really keep around the bad ones. But that's because that's the only hazardous part. Everything else you could take and easily send to a recycler. Any other piece inside the tube, and actually that's preferable, like for a recycler, because it's all copper wire and gold circuit boards in there. There's people that used to just scrap. You could look on YouTube for scrapping channels that break down those old PCBs. And a CRT, for example, like the deflection yokes we were talking about last week, that's loaded with copper wire, like high quality.
Yeah.
So if you take that down to like somewhere that buys scrap metal, you could probably get $20 maybe for just the yoke, or at least half that at this point with the way copper prices are. So there's always that option if you have to get rid of it, to break it down. Kind of, I mean, it's a lot of work. So you'll have to do that, but there's a scrap side, or you just dispose of it. There's also, I do believe that there is still, again, local municipalities that will come out and take the whole television or monitor. But like I said, my stuff is all that. It's all parts that I think can be reused in other PVM rebuilds, or ones where someone would contact and need parts for a specific one. Mine's mostly that, and ones where parts I've had go bad in them, where I know it's not the tube or something. That's what's in there now. But it's definitely dependent on your space.
It does. The breakdown thing is interesting. I don't think I'd considered it that way before. That once you take out the tube and disconnect everything from that, then it's just basically electronics. So people can decide the scrapping it, that it might be easier to take the boards out, because you're essentially breaking it down. If you gave it to the municipality or whoever, they would have to break this down anyway, unless they just chuck it in the scrap heap, which again, are they allowed to do that? We don't know.
There are some places that will still take your trash like that and just throw it in a pile somewhere, and there's nothing really you could do about that. Because that's, again, something that's crooked and like government oversight. It's where they're just not following regulations. So that's not like your fault. So
no, but it used to be back in the day. Back in the day, it used to be everything was just. I remember that we'd go to the tip and we would back the car up to a massive mound of garbage and just throw the shit on there and drive away. Like,
and there's
but that
still
was
some places that are out rural that are still doing that. Believe it or not, but. If you can, it's, if you have to get rid of it, it's a personal choice, really. You do whatever you want, but just think about it. There's an environmental impact to just throwing it out into a scrap heap somewhere, right? That's not really great.
No, it's not a good idea.
It
So
sucks. So it kind of comes back to like the responsibility of owning the CRT. If you're going to take on that responsibility of having it, you got to be kind of prepared to get rid of it. But yeah, and then you end up with a bunch of stuff. I mean, I'm a hard comparison because I've got 100 CRTs, good or bad, here somewhere, all over the place. Just some.
But also, you are
high.
keeping. You said you're keeping only the stuff from professional monitors, which makes sense. So, I mean, to stay on consumer for a moment.
I've got like 7 good consumer sets that I keep. That I like.
Because if when you were talking about breaking it down and then keeping, and I totally understand. If I had a PVM with a bad tube, there's no way I'm chucking. Look, maybe I would dismantle it and chuck the tube, but there's no way I'm throwing out the rest of those boards, even if Louis Zezerin doesn't know what to do with them. But so that makes sense. On the consumer side, I mean, I've got a 13, I forget, is that the 13-inch little Sony. I really like it, but I checked out the error code and it blinks, and I was just like, whatever that error code is, I have to verify it again, but it's like, it's done. And I think it's the tube that's done, but in reality, the electronics inside of that, there's probably not much that I could do with that unless I was getting a lot of that monitor locally in my region. So if that monitor came up often, then maybe I could swap some parts for that. But I think also then you come across the issue that there's, like we've talked about before, there's so many variations in consumer TVs, and definitely via region and country. We see this I see it all the time here in Europe. This is the Italian model, the UK model, the German model, and we're not even sure what's different, but apparently something's different. And I guess unless you have a real great use case, it's really hard to know out of that consumer TV if it's just, I'm just chucking out a random TV. Well, doesn't seem like much I can do with it.
Yeah, and again, it's like, do you what do you have already stored up? Do you want to keep that and maybe try to find another one? But if the tube's bad already in the consumer set and it's like it's dirty, then yeah, it's like you might as well just try to find the best way to dispose of it if you can, because we're always going to run up to a point, and that's kind of where I feel like even now you can tell we're not completely out of consumer sets, so you could still go and find consumer sets. I get asked a lot about if you're looking for like a big good consumer television, you can still pretty much find them locally online if you're looking for something big. So we're not even at the point where it's worth putting much effort into servicing them and doing a lot with them. But just, that's where you're going to be doing all your work on. Is it something that I want to if it's something I want to keep, you got to try to do as much homework ahead of time and, test it if you're allowed to, and not just take something that somebody, I think that's probably where some people get into a mistake, is they just see something available for free or cheap and they go get it, and it was just worn out. Some cat peed in it a couple times and people were smoking cigarettes into it. And so you're stuck with something that's filthy, doesn't really work right. And the big thing you want to try to avoid is try to get something that all the colors work, obviously red, green, and blue, and try to make sure you're limiting any kind of jitters on the screen ahead of time before you even get it. If it shows that and you're not willing to take it apart, don't just leave the place and wait for the next one.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I have the example that I keep bringing up is this small, whatever it is, 13, 14, 15, whatever they are, is a Trinitron. It's really nice. Yeah. I like that physically, the shape of it. But, and it was it's an adventure, because the flip side of what you just said is, look, and I agree with your logic. Your logic is sound, absolutely. It is hard sometimes to resist the allure of the CRT Adventure. We've got a listing that's come up locally. You're like, I want to go, and I want to see. And where I live as well, it's usually some old Russian lady, and she's had the last, that one I'm thinking of, it was in her kitchen. I think it must have been playing The Price is Right or The Ruble is Right or whatever the fuck they listen to over there. And I think she just had it on like 8 hour or whatever the whole day since whenever, since God, since Stalin, passed away, she's had this TV on since then, watching everything. And there's just not, I couldn't resist it. But my point is that I wanted it so much. Like, I really like that shape. I really wanted that small Trinitron. They're kind of hard to find in my region. So I said, fuck it, I'll go get it anyway. Lo and behold, not good. But after this conversation, I actually think that is a TV that I might pull apart, and I may actually chuck the tube but keep the other components, because that's actually, if I found another model of that, I would grab it straight away, because it's a consumer set that I really want. So there I can see the value to myself to actually taking the time, pulling it apart, leaving the circuit boards, and just a pile of circuit boards. Okay, not as much room as a television. Where I do have a couple of other sets, but that I would think like, if I see another one of these, I'm not really that interested in picking it up either. So everyone has to sort of make their own choice.
Well, and I think that you can, for example, take the one you're talking about, and you can make the decision if it's the one that. Sorry, Brutus is over here just scratching himself. Anyway, if you take the one TV that you've got that's you can decide that to be your project television. If you're like, hey, this, because it's a good size at 13 inches and it already looks crappy. Like, well, what happens if I do go in and recap the boards or go in and clean them, reflow all the solder, and like you said, you get all those boards wonderfully done and it still looks like crap. You could tell it's the tube. Then there's a good chance, like you say, you've had everything else working good on this TV. You just keep an eye out for the same size Trinitron, and then you do a tube swap, and then you've got a great example of one. Plus, you've gotten some experience. So there's that experience, value there if you want it. And I think that those types of TVs are worth it. The 13, because they're, like you said, harder to get. It's when you start getting into the huge ones, because they take up so much space. It's hard. Again, I mean, if you're talking a 36-inch tube weighs 140 pounds, it's not easy to move around, get rid of, get in and out of a house. So there's more value in the smaller stuff, especially just as the nostalgic way it looks too.
Sure. All right, that's good, man.
Yeah.
What are we going to do? So let's, what do we have? We have about 45 minutes. And I think that's kind of summed it up for me. Yeah, I just got to get into my storage room and actually clean some shit out, really. That's probably the biggest problem here, not my laziness.
Yeah, I feel that. I mean, it's hard to move stuff around. I've been moving a bunch of things in and out. 20-inch monitors from upstairs to downstairs in the basement, back and forth. And it's like a chore. So it doesn't make it fun when you're moving just through storage through CRTs.
But this is something that you and I will hopefully be looking at further in the next week, is this really interesting video that you sent me today called the Open Source CRT. And it appears to be a gentleman. He's on the West Coast. His name's Thomas. And he's using a tube and is it the flyback? No, the neck board. He's only using the tube and the neck board. And he has constructed his own device which interfaces to the tube and to the neck board and will drive that CRT. And it looks amazing. And I'm very keen to learn more about it and understand more about it. And I talked to Thomas today briefly on Twitter, and he said he'd love to come on and our next episode and chat with us about it. So I'm very keen for that conversation. But what are your thoughts about this device, Steve?
This is something that I saw circulating on social media at Facebook, and it was it says open source CRT TV. And I'm like, what does this even mean? So I watched the clip, and it's a guy who's got, I think it's the JVC 9-inch or 10-inch tube, and then it's all plexiglass around it. And he's got a couple boards off to the side that are all covered in plexiglass. And I was like, what's going on? And it says he brought it to a show out west for maybe a convention in 2021. The video says it's 3 months old, and it's just watching it. And from what I gather, there's and this is would make sense. There's three major parts to a CRT that are never going to be able to really be replaceable, more than likely. The tube, and then the flyback transformer, which has the anode cap and the high voltage thing everybody's scared of that we had talked about that goes in the back of the top of the tube. That's always there. And then finally, you've got to have a way to interface with the tube and send the signals in. So that's where the neck board is left on there from the original tube. But he says that the programming and the other hardware mimics the power supply and the deflection blocks, and then your input controls. So you think about it, you're getting rid of all the other boards. You're just keeping those three major parts. And I'm sure that if you wanted to, you could get rid of the neck board and just use the CRT socket, which is the part that connects the board to the tube. And I'm just sure that's the way that it's interfacing, sending in signals into the electron gun. And so I'm extremely excited. I mean, that sounds pretty crazy to me. There's so many things that you could have wrong with the deflection block that if this could really solve, the idea behind the video was showing some testing and the way that he was manipulating the power supply with potentiometers to get the horizontal deflection to change was interesting. He would spin the voltage and lower it on the horizontal lines of the power, and it would cause the horizontal to phase to shape, go in and out. But it wouldn't work the same for vertical. It would just show vertical fold over, which just looks like something you need a repair on. So he's having to use, I think, firmware to do all the other settings. And he's saying, I started thinking about what are the possibilities if that were something that took off and it was open source, and the firmware settings, and eventually would firmware be used to sit there and instead, you could tweak your geometry, color, and every other setting in your CRT from software instead of, kind of like an expanded OSD or service menu on the CRTs that maybe never had one. He said it could hook up to any CRT tube, so of course that's exciting, right?
That's the big claim. And again, I don't mean to cast any down on him. That's the big news here as well. I mean, it's an amazing achievement to be able to do, even if it was specific for one monitor, that would still be a great project and an amazing, very cool achievement. But that's the thing. He said it should work on any tube and neck board. And I'm very interested to learn more about how specific. I mean, sure it can, but what's the difference? Is it like with the RGB mod, the similar idea that the ideas are similar, but you're going to have to hunt around for the particular points and connections on that board and then attenuate it. But even when we spoke about the RGB mod, and we said that, well, you got to find the right points. You still have to work out the attenuation that you're delivering to those points. And it can be done, but it's not quite drop in. But if you told me I had to do that work and I had to do all of that, but then I got this whole replacement thing, I would definitely be more inclined to want to put that effort in if it meant that I got this amazing unit rather than just a kind of janky old RGB mod. So what are your feelings about wild guesses about, is it generic or what do you think?
So here's the way it's working. I think that first off, it brings up some different obstacles obviously right now, because there was a lot of hardware in the video that was, I'm guessing, the hardware that's the boards, that's the replacement for a lot of these. So I'm sure sourcing those parts right now will be extremely difficult and could take months in its own just to get boards and all the components together. But if you're thinking about just, for example, the 2530 I'm working on, you need the neck board so you can kind of get what the signals are going into it normally from the design board, so you mimic that. But think about how much better that would be if that was actual viable option, as opposed to me going in and rebuilding all the original boards. If you were just really wanting to use it, you could maybe get that. But not only that, you could have a better experience, because some of these older CRTs like that one is all manual for adjustment with potentiometers and screws. And so if you could do that through firmware, through something like, I don't know if it's based around an FPGA at that point to work out just the screen geometry, It's possible. I think that would be more exciting, where you'd have better screen features and functions available down the road. Of course, if it took off. But yeah, I mean, it's so crazy. I had no idea this was on anybody's radar or anything, even capable.
It should be.
Really
Well, we're the Cathode Ray Podcast. We are
Yeah, now we
exactly the
found it.
people who should be
This is
talking to.
I'm excited to talk about it because, again, it does bring back, if it's a good, viable option, then does it automatically turn if you go find a decent tube from a CRT that doesn't have the best inputs in it, right?
Sure.
It's got, just like I say, you go find one of these great, beautiful JVC or Trinitron tubes from the 1990s, and the TV is crap, or the inputs don't work too great, and all it is an RF and composite in. What if you can just take the important parts from that and use this open source build out, and all of a sudden you have every input you want? It's like an automatic RGB card that you could put together and attach to this same tube, right? So you would have you'd actually have a better, you'd have an RGB modded, or do whatever you want. I don't know. I mean, it seems like you could have any input in there in your input card and have that kind of new age for a CRT.
It seems great, and I guess also to point out to everybody listening, like, first of all, a lot of what we've just said is our speculation and our hopes for the future and our projections. I'll put a link to the video in there. I want to point out that Thomas himself is not overselling this. If all things, he seems like too humble. We're like, why the fuck haven't we heard about this thing before? Why are you yelling, jumping up and down about it? So I want to just point out that he is not overselling it. He is not making it out to be all of these things. It's, I think, in this moment, us wondering about all the possibilities that it could be. And like all open source projects, we've got to be realistic with the developers, even though we all want all the features and everything right now, about what can be achieved. So yeah, we just wanted to, I'm looking forward to having a conversation with Thomas and just picking his brain. And he sounds like a clever guy, sounds like a nice guy.
It's going to be talking to him and seeing really what's going on. Because yeah, like you say, we're just speculating and kind of throwing ideas at whatever work he's already accomplished to this point. Just from the video alone, though, it's impressive to see what he's got so far.
Even if it is that he's done a fair bit of work to customize it for this one tube, it's still really fucking impressive. Even if it's cool. Even if just that's still something to talk about and be amazed about.
Exactly.
All right. So why don't we try to get through a couple questions near the end here. So we're trying to get better at answering questions. We're trying to not dwell on questions forever, but still get you the stuff that you need. And we also appreciate that. Look, I understand you guys are working on CRTs at home. You're doing your best, and it's really hard to ask the right question, to give the detail. There's only so much you can describe without getting into a monitor. And Steve and I think we both share the frustration that we wish we could help more. We wish we were there to look at it, because there's just some things that are just really hard to diagnose over a paragraph or a paragraph two of text.
Exactly.
All right, let's go. This was from your Patreon, Steve. Do milliamps matter when making a cap kit?
Oh, well, that's kind of like, it depends on the device, of course. It's like, it depends on the spec. That's why it's always good to have service manuals and see what they recommend for things. The biggest.
But what are the things? So it's voltage, I know, and then there's microfarads, which is the capacitance. What does a milliamp play, and what does the amperage play?
Yeah, I don't. You're concerned about your amps and how your ohms flow through your whatever line that you're trying to fix, that you're using a capacitor on. But as far as, like, I've never had that spec'd that I can think of in a cap kit. The only time, like, you might have the things you're going to be more concerned with on your cap kits is, again, let's just go back to that, is you're going to need obviously the proper voltage, and a lot of times it's safe to go a higher voltage. Not always is it it's not safe to go lower than what is spec'd. You can go higher and really get away with it, no problem. And then you need to match 90% of the time you need to match the microfarads. There are some rare cases where you can change that a little bit and get fine performance. I've seen plenty of people work on arcade machines and swap out a similarly close microfarad. I'm talking like, something that you have a 2.2 and you might have a 3.3 or something microfarad. It's just a little bit off. Right. I've seen that happen, and I've seen different results where it doesn't like blow up the device. So you get those two right, and then the next most important two are going to be the size, the physical size of the capacitor. You want to make sure it fits without causing trouble to any other component on the board. And then finally, if you want to go even more, worry about something more than milliamps, I'd worry about ripple current. And the ripple current thing, you're going to have a higher, more vigorous ripple current, the higher quality and the higher length of life you have on your capacitor. So you're replacing a capacitor that was an 85 degree C capacitor that was designed for 1,000 hours, right? Let's say that. And then you're wanting to like get this really great capacitor that is 105 C and like 10,000 hours of life. And it does that. But if you look at the ripple current, it will have a huge ripple current. And so maybe the ripple current is what he was referring to in the question, because that would make more sense. But if that's where you can get into trouble, because then your current, you're having a ripple current where you just have a noisier electricity, less regulated and conformed and cleaner electricity. It's a little bit more higher ripple running through the system, and it can have a little bit different results. So that's why I don't say just go and get the most insanely high-end capacitor with the biggest bump, because it sometimes is too much, and it can have a result that you don't want on the screen.
Sure. Okay, so that question was from Jake Hughes on Steve's Patreon. We appreciate that. Jake. Okay, moving along. Here's a quick one for you. Neapolitan 64. Are Trinitron VGA monitors better than other brands? I've heard mixed answers, he says. I'd say, yeah, bro. Yeah, they are. like
the VGA monitors? Yeah, I mean, most of the time. Most of the time. There's the like the funny thing is they're all going to be saying Tron. So don't just think it's like a Sony only thing, because in 1998 the patent ran out for the Trinitron. So at that point every other company could come in and just make their own copy of a Trinitron. Diamondtron. You had NEC, Mitsubishi, Dell. They all made these Trons that are Samsung. Samsung has a great one. They're all just like, and I don't know, I hope I was going to show you. I mean, they're all just like my Sony GDM over here, where they're really high quality. And you could tell by looking them up on eBay, they're all going to have the flat screens just like the GDMs. And they are going to, most of the time, say some kind of Tron in the name. And they'll generally sell for $500 or more. And so it doesn't have to be Sony's name, but it's going to be some kind of Tron. There are plenty of other good Trons, but yeah, it would have been
okay. So that's
for them.
It's a good way to sum it up. That I mean, I gave the simplistic answer. Yeah, bro, it's a Sony. It's great. Now, not to say that I think all VGA monitors are very good, and you're going to have a good time playing on almost any in good condition VGA. But the point that you made is there's actually a different technology inside of driving those Trinitrons. Why are they better? Because Sony had a completely different technology to the way that and we went through this in a previous episode, the history of Trinitron. And then after a while, when that patent expired, other companies were able to use that technique. Could they produce the same thing, exactly the same quality of Sony? Hard to say, but eventually everyone else got onto that same technology. So
yes,
look, I think it comes down. Look, I'll take that FW 900 off your hands. Don't worry about it if it's no good for you.
Yep.
Okay, next one. We have Mr. Silent Vid. He talks about he's got a 16:9 Sony PVM, and it's 20S1WE, which I think is a little bit of an older one.
Yes, that's the widescreen, the single widescreen PVM 20-inch.
Oh, it's the only widescreen PVM. There isn't any more.
Not That
Or do you know? Okay.
no, not any others that I'm aware of. That's just this one freaky one. The 20, it's like 20SW1U or something like that. Or is that the model number? It's like a 20.
20S1WE.
Okay, yeah, okay. So it's a European one, I think.
Oh
But
yeah, the E
yes.
on the end.
So it's just and it's made generally around the same time as the M series. I want to say it's like late 90s. They were made, and it's just a one. So what was his?
So
what
he
was
has
special about it?
he said he has a slight black smearing on the image, mostly when you use a component, but have noticed it in RGB as well. Seems to also happen in high contrast areas to the right of the screen. Anything jump to mind about what this might be?
No, that's just kind of a breakdown of the monitor on something. You've either got probably a video board breakdown, input board. I mean, that's could be a lot of different things on there. Hopefully, it's not the tube itself just kind of wearing out, because that can be, if you start seeing shadows on a tube, that could be a sign that it's starting to wear down. But other than that, I would try to go in and, if you're really concerned about it, diagnose those other things. Also, make sure that your signals, that test multiple consoles and make sure it's not just coming from one console that is actually causing the problem. Like if it's your Super Nintendo and you're chain different input cables and inputs with it, it could still be the case. You know, if it's doing it with a bunch of different consoles, then start looking at the monitor.
Sure, that makes sense. I don't want to. Actually, that leads us on to another question, which was from Tyler Hayblom, and Tyler seems to have an issue with component coming out of the Mister. And he's got a Mister. He's using component out. I presume then with a I/O board. I'm going to presume I/O board and not direct video based off what he said. Gets a nice signal, but I see screen stretching sometimes, and he's tried adjusting the CRT, and he's not getting the signal that he wants out of component. And I would say, based off what I've worked on in component coming from Mister, is that the Mister component is still not like alpha or still not like 100%. It's still a little bit beta. And if you look in the documentation, it still says, look out. We know that this is not quite the component output of a Mister is not at the same level as the RGB out. I mean, in terms of development, it's still a little bit beta is what I'm trying to say. So the first thing I would be testing, I wouldn't be using a Mister as your component testing machine. I'd be getting PS2, I'd be getting anything that outputs a nice component to diagnose from there. What are some of your thoughts, Steve?
Yeah, again, when you're mixing devices like this, it's always hard to tell because you have a cutting edge piece of technology. We've gone into plenty on last episode about the Mister stuff. It could be anything of that. You could have, your script's not updated correctly or something. I mean, there's all kinds of people that have documented where something didn't exactly work perfectly. Even when they followed all the instructions for the Mister off the GitHub, they had to do it this way to get it to work. I don't feel like any of that is, all that needs to be kind of expected to go in. And again, you don't want to, first things first, go and blame the display. If there's nothing wrong with the display, you need to make sure, like you said, test it with something that works perfectly and know what it should look like in the display. And then if it doesn't look right, then even add a third thing to test in there, because I feel like, it's probably something going on with the Mister setup, but who knows without testing it further.
Yeah, and on that same note, as you said, you've got to test with something that's solid and that's established that works. Having said that about Mister Component, Mister RGB is my testing tool. Like, you tell me all the time, I've hooked up a Super Nintendo, I've hooked up a Genesis to this. I'm like, bro, crack out the Mister. It's 100%. I know you want to do it because it's nice to do it on a real thing too.
You got to try it. Most
sure. Because when it's RGB, that is my go-to for testing. I know that, and if I need composite, my go-to composite is the Antonio Villena adapter out of Mister. I know that there's different issues around converting the RGB to composite out of that Antonio can't get around, that no one can get around. but it's my go-to for a solid if I need something to work. So I think it's watch out for component on Mister. Okay, and last, we're doing very good at getting through questions. You're doing well,
yeah,
Steve.
let's do it. We're
doing good. We have one more. Scotter140. He had a question about breaking down CRTs, which we have basically already answered in this episode. Wouldn't it be cool if there was a way to just swap boards and change those? And there is, to somewhat level at a professional monitor level. Yes, there is maybe even a secondary market for just the boards because they're well known. But I don't think that's ever really going to be a thing with consumer TVs. Again, because like you say, who's worrying so much about these consumer TVs to create a market, and two, so many possible variations that it can be very difficult to keep an accurate inventory of what's going to work in each individual machine.
Yeah, and I think that the biggest hope would be for that, if there's something you really, really like, a TV you really, really like, the best hope would be that open source project where you could turn it into the monitor that you want while maintaining the same screen that you have your dream set around. I get people that ask a lot about what can they do to really old televisions to make them more modern, right? Like solid state televisions that are not built around the same technology. It's still based around a flyback, but those boards are crazy where they have voltage running all over. It's not isolated. And so they're more dangerous. There's a lot more going on in the tuners, and there's no composite video or better out of them. But if this was an option where you could just take those important parts from an old school wood grain television and then just turn it into an awesome monitor with every input through a VGA input or something, then that'd be pretty cool. So I think that would be the hopes along the lines of something like that, or rebuilding it and figuring out something yourself. But yeah, that would probably be the biggest for that. I did have one little quick thing to go through. It was just a question about an adapter and the best way to get S-Video into a commercial device where they split Luma and Chroma from the S-Video. So we all know in the United States and North America that we had S-Video. So there's a lot of devices that run on S-Video. And then early on in the Commodore monitors, there was a split where it would have S-Video, but it would say like Commodore Video, and it would have Chroma and Luma on it. And that's all S-Video is Chroma, Luma, and ground. And the sync signal is sent over Luma. So there are still some stuff. Console 5 sells a cable that goes from S-Video, and then it has two RCA prongs out the end.
Keep talking. I think I have one. Just keep talking, and I'll.
And then there's other options. I have some homemade adapters like this that I'll show on the screen, where it's actually nicer. It's got a nice printed circuit board, and then one side is your Luma, one side's your Chroma. You just stick your S-Video signal in there, your cable in there, and it breaks it down like this, and you can put a BNC cable on each one. Because the cards on a commercial gear is 90% of the time going to be in BNC. And but these, again, this was something that was custom made by somebody that I found at a salvage auction, and I found 5 of them, so I just bought them all for $10. But
that's a cool
the
pickup.
cable
Here I have
so there's a cable, right?
So this is just from I think this is AliExpress. So that's standard S-Video,
right?
Standard S-Video, and then it breaks it out to the two BNCs on the end. Now, is this a shielded cable? No. Is this something that I would probably want to use? I'd be wary about using this in my setup, but for your testing and so forth, it works.
It would be good for testing, but if you just look at it, if you hold that cable up, if you look at it, it is something that you could design or make your own of. Even where if you cut that apart and had a 3D printer, and you made it and you used better sourced BNC cables that you salvaged, or even if you just, you made something like this, I think that it's still something you can make because there's no actual signal conversion going on. But yeah, that version and the console 5 version are going to be your cheapest, easiest options just to get the job done. But it's not shielded, and I think that's why they're only 6 inches long.
Yep. It's
So
probably it
that's
as well.
better that it's shorter.
I
So
haven't seen
that's a good
that
one.
many. It's a good question. I haven't seen that many devices that break out. I think one of my Extron converters does that. It's pretty typical for those guys to do it, because even that BVM 9044D that I presented last week, it has a proper S-video plug on it.
And all the PVMs will have a proper S-video plug. It's literally just a couple of the BKM S-video or BKM cards for BVMs mostly. And then, it's like that's pretty much where you're going to run into it. And then maybe some other specialty monitors that you'll run into it. You'll run into it in security monitors sometimes. They'll run off that. So it's not very common that you run into it, but it's definitely BVM stuff.
Sure.
Well, not except for yours.
Well, this one,
BVM.
Just
and then there's
AliExpress.
There's another 14-inch BVM, I believe, that uses S-video, but the good majority of the bigger ones will use that YC separator.
I'd imagine so, yeah. I think because it's small. Anyway, who knows why they made that choice there.
I think it was just to keep the signals further apart, claim it was better quality, shielded each line. But, yep, that's it. I don't know. I got something that I bought off
Oh, yeah, tell us. What
Black Friday
Please
for
show.
Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm going to see if this is worth the crap or not. It's $55 US shipped. I think it was like $20 off, but it's a chargeable handheld ESD duster. So like I hold this button down, it's got a nice actuator switch there. You can hear clicky, but you hold it down, then the engine pumps up and blows air out of this clean with it. And this is all plastic and shield, ESD proof, so you can get in there, and it's supposed to be for stuff. Get in there and blow air,
and it rotates like a toothbrush.
Well, no, it doesn't rotate. It's just got a brush end on it. So this was kind of a cheaper one. I thought I'd try it, as opposed to because I come into the situation now where you want to get down there and clean without busting out an entire. Like I have a commercial grade air compressor, but that's a pain to go up there and use in the garage. I thought this would be handier. Plus, if you look at the price of those cans of cleaner that is like air cleaner, this will be the price of like 10 of those cans. And hopefully it will last longer. So I might do a review on that little thing and show how it cleans up circuit boards and if it lasts a long time or if it's just garbage.
Yeah, I'd love to know about that.
Yeah.
Those cans of compressed air, I always feel weird whenever I've had to buy them.
I hate those things.
You're buying air. Just an air in a can. I feel like I'm in that scene in Spaceballs with Mel Brooks, and he gets the can of air.
You just want to, and it never lasts that long, and you just want to it just feels like environmentally crap. It's like such a ripoff. So hopefully that will be a good solution, because the only other idea I had was to actually physically drill a hole and install like a hard line for an air hookup, like in my floor, under the floor, so I could run the air compressor outside like a shop and have
pretty badass
air tools inside. But that would cost about $100, I think, to safely do. And so this would be the easier thing. And then also, but again, a lot of people that are concerned about space, this will be a better option. Plus, you don't have to hopefully worry about those. Again, buying stock in those cans of air.
When you spray the can, because it's been under pressure, it comes out very cold and always forms. And to me, that doesn't seem
like
right.
A crystallized layer. Yeah, that also makes me nervous spraying that, because again, we were talking about random temperature changes, so it's not good to temperature change, especially like if you pull out a hot circuit board that you've just been working on or just been testing, and it's like 100 degrees, and you've blasted with that cold Arctic blast. It could just like kill the solder right then. The final little random thing is I got this. So I got this a couple years back from last year from a Goodwill for $3. Pikachu box.
Oh, just the box, is it?
No,
the Hey You
no,
Pikachu?
no,
No? Is it the mic?
Yeah, no. So it came with the game, perfect condition. The box is okay. All the documented paperwork, and I was just laughing because I bought it. It was $4, right?
Sure.
They don't know how to price it. But yeah, I went to a retro gaming store, and I was like, if I ever see it, I'm gonna just buy it. And they had just the like the little microphone attachment. And so now I don't know. Whenever I don't even collect this stuff normally like that, but I would. You get it, and then you're like, I want it to be complete. So now I'm looking for a little, like this kind of thing for the microphone that's yellow.
Oh, yeah,
Because it had that, and then there's a little piece of plastic that attaches it to an N64 controller. And so I just
Well,
like
those
to have,
things
like,
are
like that.
extremely common in Japan.
Oh,
Like,
really?
When the hard off secondhand stores that you can tour around, this franchise of them, every one of them has multiple of those in the junk bin. Now, the little foam thing, well, that's something that can fall off and is not as easy. But
It's usually
I'll
looks
add that.
like rubbish.
Yeah, it's been
whenever I see
rubbish,
it.
and some 3-year-old stuck it up his nose and there's snot on it. I mean, I don't want to take anything like that from the junk bin.
No.
Anything that I'm going to have to put my mouth
I think it'd be
near.
better for like a reproduction if you could just find a repro
Maybe.
yellow thing like this for a tiny mic that people have on their cheek or something.
But I'll keep it in
Put on
mind
there.
next
Yeah, if you
time,
see that
whenever
little-
I'll get
just
to
that
go.
little dongle. Or I actually got I ordered for my son. He's not here, so he's at school. I ordered him a 3D printer for Christmas.
Oh, cool.
So it's the Ender 3 version 2. So it's pretty decent printer. So I'll be able to 3D print stuff like that.
Yeah, I was going to say,
get
is it
more
for
into
him,
that.
Steve, or is it
Yeah,
for
right.
you?
He's like, oh yeah, 3D printer. I'm like, good gift to ask for. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it. I don't
Classic.
know. Did you get anything cool this week or?
No, I haven't had any pickups, unfortunately.
No, that's okay.
You know, some weeks I have this urge that I'm always on the classifieds and I'm always looking at something and I'm always, I don't know, finding something. But for the last week, no, I don't know. It hasn't been a thing. But I don't think there's much
It's hit or
going on.
miss, like you said. I don't know that. Normally, I don't have anything either that's that exciting, but that's
it's all good.
no CRTs for either one of us this week. I don't think.
It's
just the
probably
stuff
good
that's
that we're
here.
not picking. I mean, that would be 52
Well, yeah.
CRTs a year. I'm not sure.
I was gonna say I did get the board for the CRT, so I got another CRT
Something.
working. But yeah,
Something. Well, why don't we wrap it up there? It's been
Sounds good.
an hour and a quarter already. Steve, very nice talking to you. Stay on the line. I'll end this one and then we'll keep on going. But yeah, thank you everyone for watching. Please keep asking your questions. Put them in any video. YouTube shows me, I don't know, there's not so many people flooding the questions yet. So just write them almost wherever on whichever video you're watching this under, and we will get to them. We're a little bit out of sync because we release on a Monday and then we record on a Tuesday. So sometimes we'll have to get into a better schedule. But anyway, you guys get the idea. We have not forgotten about your questions. Please write them down. We appreciate your input. Steve, thank you very much for another episode.
yeah. Thanks, Lewis. Have a great
All right.
week.
See y'all next time.